Thanks for joining. Writer. Hey everyone. Hi everybody. How's it going? Good to see ya. Hey everyone. Back on my cooking grind today. Congress, DC really left for recess about a week ago, so we've been doing a lot of work in our communities. It's really fabulous because we have about a full 6 weeks where we can just take that time and dedicate it entirely to our communities. So I've been in the Bronx and Queens all week doing all sorts of things. We've been doing Know Your Rights advocacy at the subway stations. We've been trying to get people hired at the census. So the census is hiring right now. For a lot of people, it can be a great, depending on the position that you're seeking for them. I mean, they're literally hiring thousands of people in the New York area for the next 2 years. So make sure you sign up if you're looking for a job and if you want to kind of dip your toe in community organizing. This is a great way to do it. So you can just kind of Google census hiring in New York or New York City. I mean, they're hiring all over the country, but I'm here in New York City. As you can see, it's a little hot, but I'm making a hot dish anyway, so whatever. And I'm just here to do our usual, cook a little bit, answer some questions while I prepare dinner. And it's been a little while, so I'm excited because DC gets a little crazy, and these are a little bit harder to do. Also, in DC, the kitchen that I have is not as conducive to IG Lives because it's like a wall. The lighting is crazy, but there's not a lot of space. So, doing a little bit of this and that. So let me see. A lot of people are asking what I'm making. I'm making some chicken tikka masala. Just ran to the store. I have all the spices and stuff, although I am missing ginger, which is a really big bummer, so it may not taste exactly how I'm used to it tasting, but sometimes things happen. Sometimes you're missing something, you just gotta adapt. So I'm here. First thing you gotta do with rice always is rinse it. So that's what I'm doing. So I'm just rinsing the rice, making sure that it doesn't get clumpy or anything like that. You have to clean it. Just gotta make sure you do that. So I'm just starting with the rice. I'm back on the Instant Pot too, so rice is super easy in the Instant Pot. You just toss it in. Just add some salt, some water, I like to put a little dab of butter in there. So we're going to be doing that. And then I'm going to start making the marinade for the chicken. So here's just a little knob of butter. And some salt. Hey everyone. I'm going to start answering your questions in just a second. Just starting this real quick. Giving it a good stir, and then we'll get to the good stuff. Okay. It's not turning on. Hey everyone, sorry, I'm having a little bit of a... I think I need to... I shouldn't do that. I need, just stick something on it. I thought I reset it. It's not turning on though. Oh no, is there something wrong with my Instant Pot?
Switch to outlets.
Am I missing something? What? Guys, I think my Instant Pot isn't working. Is it plugged in here? Has anyone had this problem? Has anybody had the problem of your Instant Pot? Someone says jiggle the plug. Wait, guys. It's literally been so long that, I mean, as far as I know, you just put the top on and turn it and it turns on, right? It's plugged in. Huh. Oh, what a bummer. It's not working. Not that I know of. Maybe I'm losing it. I'm doing some troubleshooting, guys. Huh. Sorry, y'all. I'm trying to see if my Instant Pot's not turning on. Everyone, this is so sad. This is my first time using it since getting back from DC this week. So I haven't had a chance to try it. I don't know why. Let's see. Has anyone had this problem?
Is the pressure valve correct?
Let's see. I'm unplugging it on the hot side. Let me see if the outlet's working. There's a toaster in here. Okay, the toaster's not working, so that tells me something. So maybe this plug is the problem? But even this plug's not working. Oh no. Guys, this is so sad. Someone says press the reset button on the outlet. I pressed it before. Maybe I'll try this one. Oh! Hey! It was the outlet. It was the fuse. Let me see. Maybe this one.
Looks like the light's on. On the right.
Oh! Okay, now they're both working. Hooray! All right. I guess the outlet's on this whole wall. confused. All right, thank you all for staying patient with me there. That was crazy. Yay, we fixed it. Thank you everyone. All right. See, teamwork makes the dream work. Thank you all for checking it out. Okay, so I'm gonna do this. I'm gonna put the rice. And that should start it, huh? Okay, cool. Yay, okay. Whoo! See, guys, if we just keep at it, we can solve problems together. I'm a big, firm believer in that. Oh, I'm so excited that this thing's not broken. Well, not broken, but I'm so excited we're able to turn it on in time. Whew. All right, now, back to what I'm making. I'm making some chicken tikka masala with rice, and I wish I could say I was making it with some warm naan, but I went to the supermarket and I'm shocked that the supermarket did not have naan because we have a very just present and flourishing South Asian community in my district and in my neighborhood, and I didn't have any naan at the supermarket. I don't know why, but I needed something, so I don't know if this is gonna like work out well, but it's like some pita-esque looking thing. Maybe if I try and I pray and I put some garlic and butter on it, it'll do in a pinch. But yeah, so first things first, I just need to chop up some of this chicken, and then we'll get going. Oh, this is bones in it. Ew. Today's like not my cooking day, guys. The cooking gods have not smiled upon me. I have to like debone these breasts. I thought I got them boneless, but I got them with bones in them. But that's okay. I'll make it work. Okay, so first thing first, I need to chop this up and then make a marinade. So I will be doing that. And let me see, what's the first question we got here? Sorry, y'all, I'm just taking a look at some of the questions sent in, seeing which ones are here. Okay, let's see. Someone says, I have a question. What's your opinion on a public option versus Medicare-for-All? So I think this is a really great question to ask. I think it's a really important conversation that we have in our debate. For anyone who watched the presidential debates, this week, oh man, this bone is like really in here. For anyone who watched the presidential debates this week, you'd see a lot of different debate on healthcare proposals. And of course, a lot of people are in favor of Medicare-for-All. Some people are in favor of a public option. I happen to be in favor of single-payer Medicare-for-all, because I think that when you look at other countries and how they pursue, this is starting to steam up. When you look at other countries and how they pursue healthcare. And once again, the United States is one of the only Western countries to not have universal health care, one of the only developed nations. So it's just kind of ridiculous that there are some aspects to this debate that we're still having. But anyways, if you learn from other systems, when you see other countries that do it and learn from other systems, I think that ultimately single-payer healthcare is the way to go. Here's why I think that. First of all, there's a principle level, there's an economic level, and there's also kind of a political level, I think, as well. First, in terms of the principle, I do not believe that health insurance should be a for-profit venture. I don't believe that it operates the same way that other industries operate. People tend to think that if you make everything for profit, it's going to make everything better. So if you have for-profit insulin, if you have for-profit hospitals, if you have for-profit just healthcare, that it's somehow going to make everything better due to the nature of free market competition. Except if you've ever taken an economics class, one of the first things you learn about is supply and demand. And there's something in economics known as the elasticity of demand. What does that mean? What that means is how badly you want or need something is, this is not all it means, but one of the implications is how badly you want or need something will have a huge impact on how much you're willing to pay for that thing. And so one of the classic examples in economics is that there's something known as perfectly inelastic demand, which is no matter how expensive something is, you will pay that amount for it. And the classic example of that, where the rules of supply, the typical rules of supply and demand fall out the window, is healthcare, is medicine and insurance. Because when it comes to medicine and insurance, people really don't have the choice to not purchase the thing. Because your life is being held hostage. Sorry guys, we got some motorcycles. We got a bunch of motorcycles running in the background. So what that means essentially is that, sorry guys, I'm collecting my thoughts, it's been a hot day. So what that means is that you will pay an infinite amount. It does not matter if your insulin is $5 or $500. If you can pay it, you will pay it because the price of not purchasing your insulin is death. So it's not like you're saving up for a cute t-shirt. It's not like you're saving up for a nice piece of jewelry. Health insurance and healthcare and medicine is not an option of not purchasing. And right now, with our current for-profit system, companies and corporations, from pharmaceutical corporations to health insurance corporations, can essentially charge you an unlimited amount. They will charge you whatever it is that will get you, in many instances, closest to bankruptcy and sometimes beyond bankruptcy, because there's a perverse incentive, because they know that you're going to purchase their good. And it's even more malicious when you look at an instance like insulin, where the actual patent for insulin was developed and sold by scientists for $1, because the actual scientists who developed the treatment this treatment for diabetes said no person should ever go without this because they can't afford it. And so the actual patent for insulin costs $1, yet pharmaceutical corporations are holding people hostage and charging $300 a vial for what is $20 or even less in other countries. So that's why our current that's why our current system is broken. So I initially start off with the fact that I do not believe that the vast majority of healthcare should be for profit. I do not think that people should make money every time someone is diagnosed with cancer. I don't think we should have a for-profit incentive on chemotherapy and other things. Now, there's this whole idea of, well, if we don't charge $300 for insulin, then companies are going to have zero incentive to solve the world's diseases. And so we won't get any treatments. First of all, what good is a treatment if no one can afford it? What good is a treatment? What good is having insulin if people cannot buy insulin? So we need to have both sides of the coin. But secondly, one of the most important things of that too is that a lot of it just plain isn't true. A lot of these corporations say we spend all of our money on research and development. Actually, by and large, pharmaceutical corporations spend more of their money purchasing their own stock in order to drive up prices and increase CEO pay than they do in their own research and development. Secondly, the government actually funds a lot of the initial research. Not even the government, we, the public, spend a lot on the initial research in order to develop promising drugs. That's not to say that pharmaceutical companies have no place and all of these things, but I think we need to debunk a lot of the myths. Thirdly, scientists don't, there's more than one incentive to be in the world. And I know a lot of scientists, at a certain point, the primary incentive is not financial. The primary incentive that scientists have is to help people. So I don't think that if we start charging humane prices for insulin, that people will suddenly be disincentivized from solving other medical issues. But all of this coming back to public option versus Medicare-for-All. So one, I do not believe that health insurance on a moral level should be a for-profit enterprise. I do not think that people should be profiting off of the illness of others. But secondly, how do we fix this system? Well, the vast majority of countries, other developed countries, have universal health care where every person in a country can, in fact, access and go to a hospital and go to a doctor. And there are different forms of doing this. One is a public option and the other is single-payer healthcare. Single-payer is one system that the entire country buys into and is publicly funded, and you walk in and it is it's almost free. Like, you'll have your prescriptions will be a very nominal price, very affordable. Your doctor's visits are completely covered. You can walk into any hospital and you'll be fine. And this is kind of the system that the UK has with the National Health Service, the NHS. That's a fully nationalized system. In fact, that's even more. The UK system, I would argue, is even more to the left than even Medicare-for-All, because Medicare-for-All is a universal insurer program, but with the National Health Service in the UK, the government runs all of the hospitals. The doctors are paid by the government. The nurses are paid by the government. That's not even what we're talking about with Medicare-for-All. So when it comes to the public option says, let's just open Medicare and let anyone who wants to buy into Medicare buy into it. And Medicare-for-All says, let's just do away with for-profit insurance and create a single-payer system that everyone has. So the reason I believe that Medicare-for-All is a better option than the public option is for a few reasons. One is that it's not about access to insurance. It's about access to affordable health care. And one of the key ways that we drive down costs is by using bargaining power. So one thing about the VA, as much as there are a lot of improvements that we have to make to the VA, first being we actually need to hire all of the vacant positions that are in the VA that haven't been hired in this administration, haven't been filled by this administration. But one thing that the VA has going is that the VA's drug prices, their prescription prices, are 40% lower than the average prescription price. So anything that you pay, whether it's for birth control, whether it's for insulin, whether it's anything that you need for anxiety or anything like that, your VA prescription is usually 40%, would be 40% of the normal price. Why are VA drugs so much cheaper? Well, VA drugs are so much cheaper because since they are a single system for our veterans, they use collective bargaining power to reduce the price of pharmaceuticals. So you see this come into play every time you go into, say, a Costco, or if you go into a BJ's. If you go into one of these big bulk stores, you can get your average good at a much lower price, but it's because you're buying a lot of it. It's because they are a bulk wholesaler, and when you buy things in bulk, you can negotiate the price, and then you can often get a much cheaper price. That's essentially the power. That's one of the big aspects and the power of Medicare-for-All. Because when we're all in one single-payer system, then we can negotiate prices with pharmaceutical corporations and drive down the prices dramatically. So when it comes to a Medicare-for-All system, I believe that Medicare-for-All has the power to drive down costs much better than a public option does. But, there are some folks that argue on the other end that they think that a public option is fine, all these other things. Now, there's this other argument of, unions. Unions fought so hard and they negotiated so hard to get their level of insurance, and now you're just going to say everyone's going to get insurance. Those people often gave up wages, etc. Well, first of all, Medicare-for-All is endorsed by many of the biggest labor unions in the United States. Everyone from the National Nurses Union to the American Federation of Teachers, many AFL-CIO unions have endorsed Medicare-for-All, and the reason for that is because healthcare is always used as a bargaining chip against working people. So they'll say, we're going to take your health benefits away, and then the union always has to organize in order, and the union always has to organize in an insane degree just to keep what they already have. So actually, if we create a single payer system, then they can more effectively organize for wage increases in the future instead of spending all of this time trying to just protect their health care. So those are just some of the reasons why I support Medicare-for-All over a public option. And I got to start working on my food too. So let's see what we got here. Why is it so hard to impeach a president that is clearly unfit to run a country? Well, we need 218 votes in the House to effectively impeach. So there are a lot of folks in the House. I believe at least 109 have come out in favor of impeachment. We need 218. We have more than 218 Democrats in the House. So what you need to do, what everyone needs to do, is check who their representative is, their member of Congress is, and see if their member of Congress has come out in favor of impeachment. And a lot of times we take our representatives' views for granted, and we'll say, oh, that person's definitely for impeachment, or oh, that person's definitely not for impeachment. You have to actually check, because there are over 100 Democrats who have not come out in favor of impeachment. And so if you want to know why it's hard because people may not be pressing their member of Congress on impeachment. And so I will ask you to do your homework. Don't take your member for granted. Look them up, see what their position is, and if they haven't come out in favor of impeachment, you need to call them. You need to email them. Believe it or not, I know people say, like, call your representative, and people think that that's, like, corny and that it doesn't do anything. Trust me, it does things. I personally count, and a lot of members, they count, and they really respond to what their constituents are telling them. And what happens is that a lot of folks, they think, oh, I elected a Democrat, so they're going to believe all the things that I believe because they're a Democrat. That's not true. You have to make sure that if you feel passionately about an issue, that you call your representative and tell them, because they keep tallies of these things. And a lot of times, if they don't know how their community feels because their community doesn't call them, then they're going to make assumptions about how their community feels. And sometimes they're not assuming the things that you want them to assume. Okay, let's see. Can you explain the Ricky scandal that happened in Puerto Rico? Yes, I can. This is a really important conversation that we have, that everybody really sees what is going on. Sorry, I'm just jumping to my recipe here. Okay. Sorry, y'all. I'm making my marinade. Okay. My marinade has 1 cup plain yogurt. That's good enough. So here's what's happening in Puerto Rico. Time is moving by so crazy. I believe it was several weeks ago that, well, let's start with this. Hurricane Maria was, as many people know, one of the most, actually a lot of people don't know, it was one of the most devastating natural disasters in American history. Anywhere between, depending on who you ask, 3,000 and 4,000 people died in the aftermath of Hurricane Maria. And the horrifying part about it is that a lot of people believe that many of these deaths could have been preventable, because it wasn't that 3,000 people actually died in the hours of the storm. It was that 3,000 people died in the completely horrifying aftermath of the storm. Some places on the island were without power for almost a year. People were operating their homes on generators. It was mass chaos. And people died. Even more people got sick. An entire generation of children are growing up breathing mold spores from the homes that never recovered, that were soggy, and so mold started growing in all these homes. And when the wind would blow, the air on the island was extremely hard to breathe. Children and adults were developing breathing problems and a number of other ailments. It was terrible. And we've been living with the reality of Maria for over 2 years now. And it's been really hard. I recently went back to Puerto Rico. I was in Puerto Rico a couple months ago with my family, and there are homes that still have blue tarps on them. And the response to the storm from the federal level all the way down to the local level has been completely defunct. It has been inhumane. It has been, I would say, criminally negligent. But there was no evidence of foul play. But everyone living through the storm knew that there was just something incredibly wrong. But there was no proof. So a few weeks ago, this collective of journalists on the island were able to find and leak 900 pages of a group chat that had the governor, lobbyists, members of his cabinet, discussing a wide range of issues. We're talking 900 pages. So what they found was an extraordinary degree of corruption. They found them talking about journalists in really disparaging ways. They were even talking about New York City former council members in very disparaging, homophobic ways. They were mocking the dead, so they made fun of they mocked the dead bodies that were piling up in the morgue after the storm. Meanwhile, remember, the government of Puerto Rico was asserting for a very long time that only 64 people had died in the storm. Meanwhile, in this group chat, you have the governor, lobbyists, members of his cabinet joking about the bodies that were piling up after the storm. But it goes much deeper than that. It pointed to the corruption. There was a lot of discussion about fixing the media. So there was a lot of discussion about planting stories and corrupt contracts and all of these things. And it just showed and proved to the people of Puerto Rico that the entire top tier of government not only knew, but actively advanced a corruption that cost people's lives. And so the people began to say, you know what, this has to end. This must stop. And so what they did was that they began to protest. They took to the streets, and the people took to the streets, and they began to protest in some of the most creative and triumphant ways. People came together in a way that we haven't seen in a very, very, very long time. And so what I think was so inspiring was that the government had tried every trick in the book to get them to stop. The governor was making all of these public statements saying that he apologizes. Saying that he apologizes and all of this stuff. And people demonstrated in such triumphant and creative ways. And they would not stop. Just thousands of people. And they're still there. They're still there. So it was a really incredible day. And it's been a really incredible couple of weeks. And the people in Puerto Rico have successfully gotten the governor to resign. He put in his resignation. And today was actually his last day in office. Now, the problem and the trouble is that people didn't know who was going to take over. So just like here with our federal government, if the president has to resign, the vice president takes over. But what essentially happened in Puerto Rico is that so many cabinet members resigned in this whole scandal that the order of succession was highly in question. So the governor is resigning, the lieutenant governor had been resigning, and they were really just kind of going down this chain. The secretary, and it ultimately was supposed to be it was ultimately down to where the Secretary of State needed to take over. But the Secretary of State didn't want the job, and so they were resigning. So the actual succession was going to happen today, and people literally didn't know until 5 minutes beforehand what was going to happen, if the Secretary of State was going to get approved. And so that Secretary of State is approved, but I think there is still something of a question, because so many of the members of this administration were corrupt. And when I say corrupt, I mean they were in bed with a lot of the corporations. They've been in bed with something known as La Junta, the Promesa Board. They've been in bed with lobbyists, with industry. Basically, there's no one in this situation that is actually representing the people of Puerto Rico. A lot of them have their pockets lined. A lot of them have their hands in different cookie jars, whether it's Wall Street cookie jars, fossil fuel cookie jars. There's the people of Puerto Rico are trying to look around and find anybody that is not compromised by special interests. And so that's the problem that is before us here in this situation. And so people are trying to figure out what to do next. But there is now currently an acting governor, and I think everyone is trying to see what that means and what our future on the island means. But ultimately, I believe that the protests were profoundly inspiring, and it showed how people can take power into their own hands, how you can enact change into your own hands and force and pressure things to happen. So that's a big, it was a big win, but I also think it's part of a decolonization process. And what a decolonization process means is that the people of Puerto Rico must decide their own status for themselves. It should not be a status that's imposed by the United States on Puerto Rico, and it should be a truly free process of self-determination. So I think that part is what's extremely important, and frankly, I think La Junta needs to go. I think the Promesa Board needs to go. Basically, this is also what happened in Flint, where they took the economic power of government away, and they handed it to a board that contains lobbyists and other undemocratically selected individuals. And this set off a chain of closing schools and all sorts of things. And I think that the Promesa Board is really a representation of a U.S. neo-colonial relationship with its own citizens, with people who are its own citizens. And it has to end. I don't think it's sustainable. So I'll do my next question, and then I'll... Do you agree with some aspects of Republicans' point of views? I do, actually. I think there are quite a few Republican viewpoints that I actually share, and I think that there are a lot of places where I have common ground. I actually think that I have a lot of common ground with many of the libertarian viewpoints in our party. I did a radio interview earlier this week, and where folks felt that I had kind of insinuated that libertarians don't like immigration. And I think what I meant by that, well, not I think, what I know what I meant by that is that there are a lot of members of Congress who identify with libertarian viewpoints, but they hold anti-immigrant views. And so while anti-immigrant views are not libertarian, or rather, since in concept libertarians should be very pro-immigration, in terms of ideology. In practice, in Congress, they are often not. But true libertarians, which many of them happen to be in the Republican Party, true libertarian viewpoints are pro-immigration. So that's one. Another is that I hold quite anti-interventionist viewpoints, aka I'm anti-war. And so from the perspective of small government, there are people who believe that there are Republicans who are very consistently anti-war and anti-military spending. So I do tend to find a lot of common ground with them on that. I tend to feel like the issue is that I tend to agree with certain ideological viewpoints. The problem is that the modern Republican Party is not an ideological party anymore. They are not a party of small government. Like originally, conservatives used to be very much about small government. They used to be very much about civil liberties. So civil liberties is another area that I tend to agree with Republicans a lot on. I do not believe in I do not believe in runaway government surveillance. I do not believe that the government should be monitoring your phone, your calls, your text messages, unless they have a warrant. And I believe in due process rights. I believe in fighting against unreasonable search and seizure. And so I tend to agree ideologically with some Republicans. And there are principled Republicans. And so with principled Republicans, I tend to find common ground on certain issues. The problem is that increasingly the Republican Party in Congress is no longer ideologically conservative. They are kind of this like political mob. And so you can't count on them to reliably hold certain views anymore, because they will advance certain views if it helps the president, but then they will abandon those same principles if it doesn't help the president. And so it becomes very difficult to find common ground because a lot of them are no longer running on principles, beliefs, ideas. They're running on blind loyalty to the president, which is very difficult. So, but to answer the question, yes, I do share a lot of common ground with certain Republicans. I believe that I hold a lot of libertarian viewpoints when it comes to certain issues, when it comes to civil liberties, when it comes to immigration, when it comes to war, and when it comes to individual choice. Once upon a time, people, a lot of folks, they believe that if you want to talk about small government, I don't believe the government should be in your uterus. How about that? Let's shrink government there. I don't believe that government, I don't think we should be in 9 different wars. I don't believe that that we should be turning people away that so clearly will do everything possible to contribute to our country because, frankly, the color of their skin. So, and there are principled Republicans who agree with me on those points. Let's see. Now I'm making the sauce. To open this. Sorry, y'all, I'm working As a therapist, I think mental health care should be more accessible. Do you agree / what can be done? I definitely think that mental health care should be more accessible, which is why Medicare-for-All includes guaranteed coverage for mental health care in addition to in addition to dental, physical, and vision. So you don't need 10 different forms of insurance to cover your health. So you don't need vision and dental and physical health care, and like if you're lucky, your normal insurance will adequately cover your mental health care that you need. Um, that's why I believe that mental health is just health. It's just part of health. And you don't go to check in on your mental health just if there's something wrong. It's something that you should do just as often as you get a physical. It should be seen as, if you're struggling with a bout of depression, it should be seen the same way as if you get the flu or you have other illnesses. Things. Mental health is something that all of us have a responsibility to take care of on our own, and there should be no problem or stigma to seeking it. I think everyone should probably see a therapist at some point in your life, because life is hard and people deal with really hard things, whether you're serving in the military or whether you lost a parent, or if you're dealing with some really difficult parts in your life. Mental health is a part of your normal, typical health, and it should be considered that way, and it should be treated as such by healthcare providers, by insurance, and more. Um, so I'm a big believer in that, and I feel like our generation is really good about that. Like, I feel like our generation is very open about going to therapy, and it's very casual in that way. Okay, hold on. Okay, got this. I need some garlic next. Is this garlic good? And so mental health is a huge thing. So one of the first things we need to do is remove the stigma. It's really sad, and especially, frankly, with there are suicide rates that are getting pretty high, and whether it's suicide, whether it's addiction, our society is in a really tough spot, especially with the economy taking up the form that it's taking, where so many people are struggling with low wages. That financial stress creates mental health care issues, and everyone needs to be able to have access to the care that they need. So I believe that mental health care is a very important part of normal health care, and if you ever feel like there's anything off, please go in and see a therapist, or read, educate yourself on these things, and you can really acquire a lot of tools to help talk through any issues that you may have. And there's nothing wrong with anyone who may have an issue like depression or addiction or what have you. I'm 30 and extremely progressive. I want to run for office. Where should I start? Let me see, where should I start? I think it all depends on, well, okay, first of all, the place that you start is that you have to ask yourself why. Your why for running is the single most important thing that you have. And it's not just important for while you're running for office, it's very important for when you win, because it's what will guide your governance. And oh shoot, the question went away. It's what's going to guide your governance. So the first thing you have to ask yourself is why. And that why will help you decide how you run your campaign. It will help you decide what you even choose to run for, and how you're going to run. And so I would say, but practically speaking, how I started was that I started as an activist. And there are many, many different paths to running to office, and there are many different ways of getting there. But for me, my activism was very important, because it really clarified the agenda that I'm fighting for. And no 2 years are the same, too. You know, there are quote unquote standard progressive issues that we have. When I started, Medicare-for-All was really important, and a lot of other issues. Medicare-for-All, a living wage, tuition-free colleges were all kind of standard progressive issues. But my kind of moral compass that I got from activism is what helped us push the conversation in 2018 into things like forgiving student loan debt, abolishing ICE, a Green New Deal, and every single year we're going to have to introduce more issues into the progressive field, just because that's the nature of progressing as a country. So my recommendation is to get involved in activism. Before that, I was in education, I was in community organizing, but I have 50 seconds remaining on this live. So with that, I'm just going to bid you all farewell. As you can see, I didn't make a whole lot of progress on my dinner. So I need to finish this up, and I will post a photo of what it looks like when I'm done. Bye-bye.
Live long and prosper. Tesla.